BahandaMusic.com.au.
The Paul Common Trio was an amazing time for me, playing bass guitar with two of my best mates from the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. Paul Common and Phil Goodin, had a great time. But as I look back now at those years when we were full-time together, I have to confess to you, I think maybe making the music and getting the music heard by people and getting people to buy the music was the objective. The songs were about God, sure, but as life continued after the Paul Common Trio and through the few years of Sonic Flood, I realised that songs are actually just a really convenient vehicle to something else. Songs are not the destination. Connection with God and connection with each other is the destination. And I'm best equipped now to do that by speaking, by telling stories and singing a few songs as well. Sonic Flood was an amazing time too, but I'd have to confess to you that before Sonic Flood, I was a bit of a cynic about the whole quote-unquote worship genre. This idea of having songs that people could sing along to, and sure, the songs were about God. And the Paul Common Trio didn't generally do that. We did songs that were for people to listen to. There was a lot of involvement, but this sort of genre of worship music, quote-unquote, I sort of struggled with it. So it was kind of God's humour or irony that I ended up in Sonic Flood, one of the bands that's known as being the forefathers of the modern worship revival. And I discovered two things in that time in that band that I'm going to be forever thankful for. The first was that music is actually more potent than I ever realised, more potentially powerful at connecting people with each other and with God than I ever realised. And it's a mystery. I don't get it how it works. But the second thing it convinced me of is that the act of singing songs to God, in and of itself, is not worship. It's hopefully an expression of worship, and it's an expression of worship that I can fake. And those two realisations sort of spat me out the other end of Sonic Flood with this passion to, one, enhance in people's minds and our lives this idea that we can show the worship God through songs. That is one of the expressions, but at the same time speak and teach, hopefully, that we must surrender our lives in worship. And I found myself more passionate about this than selling CDs or getting songs on the radio.
BahindTheMusic.com.au.
It's funny to me, because before my time with the Paul Common Trio, I actually was a teacher, like Paul. He was a high school teacher. I'm a primary school teacher. I did my degree in teaching. And that was kind of the backup plan. I was going to be a bass player, a touring, recording bassist. I did that for a while. But I found that as wonderful as bass playing is, and I love to do bass playing still, God's got more to communicate through me, I believe, than can be contained by the bass notes. The bass notes are great, but there's more. There's more that can be said. There's more that can be done. And so after Sonic Flood, sort of last man standing kind of situation for me, it's like, well, what do? I can't go out in front of people with a bass guitar. I know, I'll get a good capo and play acoustic guitar. Anyone can do that. Yeah, everything's in the key of G, no trouble. In fact, my first speaking engagement was for a college in Washington State in the United States. I was going to go over and take a chapel service for a college out there. And they said, you're going to come and speak to us. I'm like, yes, absolutely. And they said, now you're a musician. Yes, I am. Well, then you can also lead some songs. And they said lead worship, but I knew what they meant. They meant, play some songs for people to sing along to that were vertical in their nature. And so I thought, crumbs, I better dust off that old guitar and learn a few chords. I found that the marriage between those two things really good. This idea of being able to sing songs and speak. So now I see myself as being a speaker who can do some songs around the edges, not a singer who talks too much. I think the world's had enough of singers who talk too much. So Grant Norsworthy, word and song, it hopefully encapsulates what I do, and it's so wonderful to me that I'm now applying more of my degree that I earned after high school than ever before in my life, even while I was teaching. In the same way that you can tell a joke that's funny and make people laugh, but it actually makes them think about something much more serious, much deeper, a song can do the same thing. You have a good melody, you have a good lyric, you sing it well, you play it well, it can actually break down some barriers. In fact, I heard a quote that I love. It says, music speaks what cannot be expressed, soothes the mind and gives it rest, heals the heart and makes it whole, flows from heaven to the soul. Now, sure, you can take music and use it for other purposes, but that's what I believe music is supposed to be for. It breaks down these barriers that we're otherwise resistant to. So, for some reason, if I've got a guitar around my neck, I can say some pretty tough things to a group of believers, a church service or a college chapel service, a school assembly, a concert. I can sing a song and hopefully include a few laughs there. And I'm passionate to convince us, and when I say us here, I mean the church, because that's who I feel like I'm mainly called to speak and to sing for, that as wonderful as singing songs to express worship is, our life surrendered in worship is what is required. And I'm also convinced that the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. You can say things like, oh, no, I know, worship is a lifestyle. But if you then turn around and say, worship starts at 11 and is finished by lunchtime, that's good. Oh, I missed worship this week. I'm going to find a different church where I like worship more. My tongue or my words are actually indicating that I've actually restricted the worship of God to about an hour 15 on a Sunday. And that's not a healthy situation, because that's not what Jesus asks of us. That's not what it means to worship God. We can't reduce the worship of this overwhelming God to ticking a religious box of an hour 15, an hour and a half on a Sunday, or any other time for that matter. I mean, we need to understand Romans 12:1, that therefore, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, offer yourself as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. And let that be a spiritual act of worship. This is what it means to worship, to offer myself completely, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That's a lot easier message to bring if you've sung some songs first and shown that it is a wonderful, beautiful thing to sing passionate love songs to God.
BehindTheMusic.com.au.
The album that I released early in 2012 called Resident Alien is, I'm really proud of it. I look at it and I see a slab of sonic there that I enjoy. I hope other people enjoy it. But really, the music on there is not the destination. It's not my passion, actually. What I've found myself doing is wanting to communicate some thoughts that wrap around each of those songs. There's a song there called Rwanda. It's my best effort to explain what happened to me when I went to Rwanda in 2009, where for the first time I started making sense of things like Mother Teresa saying, I don't go to India to take God, I go to India to meet God. You know, I met an aspect of the character of God in Rwanda that I believe I'd shielded myself from in all my life, living in Australia or the last 11 years in the United States. There's something of God amongst the least of these we just don't get. As I listen to those songs, there's stories behind each one, there's experience behind each one, there's something to try and relate to people, and the music is the vehicle I get to jump in to drive to the destination of connection. You know, this is why I think a lot of musicians kind of get bored after a number of years. I'm not bored, I'm more alive now than I've ever been. I love doing this. I think a lot of musicians get bored because they think performing their song well, or crafting a song well, or singing it well, or having a lot of people like it is the destination. I don't think it is. Now, I want to have a nice vehicle to get into to drive to the destination, but the destination is connection with God and each other. It's oneness. It's this John 4, be one as the Father and the Son are one. That's the idea of music. It just facilitates that connection.
BehindTheMusic.com.au